It's basically the many worlds theory. And Basil, do you want to sort of explain that in layman's terms?
Sure. Yeah, this is definitely a complicated thing, but it is pivotal to the whole John Titor story. Now, basically, what John Titor talks about is time travel is not necessarily as simple as it sounds. There are basically multiple parallel universes. To be more precise, there's infinite parallel universes that he calls world lines. Okay, now this is not a new concept. This is a concept that's been around for a little while, not
half a century or so.
Yeah, it's nothing, ancient, but yeah, and this is basically the theory that with every choice that we make, an alternate universe branches off, and then the two choices just go on, and create their own universe. And which, I mean, it gets very messy. It's a very messy thing,
right.
And I enjoy the theory in more of a mathematical sense, in scientific statistical sense, which is, I believe, what the theory was originally used for. I mean, if you're familiar with quantum physics and Schrodinger's cat and things like that, this is something that's pretty widely used in more of a mathematical sense. But what John Titor is saying is, when you travel in time, you're not even necessarily traveling within your own world line. You're almost skipping around these infinite number of alternate universes.
Right. And so to me, that immediately causes me to ask a very important question, I think, to the whole theory, is that, now, is this only from the perspective of a conscious being or a sentient being, or is this, if a sand pebble moves a different direction or whatever, is every possibility of every object here in the universe branch off into a different alternative possibility, or is it just for sentient conscious beings?
Right. And see, this is where it gets pretty complicated, and I'm going to try to slow it down so we can get a firm grasp on this concept. Basically, it is predicated on a sentient observer making a choice that creates an alternate world line. However, things that happen without a sentient observer, being a human being or a dog, I guess, also works. It becomes very sketchy because it's tied in with this whole thing is the concept of, what is existence when we're not there looking at it, right? Like if a tree falls in the woods and there's nobody there to hear it, doesn't make a sound, right? The scientific answer, the real answer is no, it does not make a sound. It makes vibrations, but there are no colors, there are no sounds, there are no actions being taken unless there's an observer to see it and to interpret it and to give this sort of mishmash of molecules and vibrations meaning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. There's a Dr. Sten Odenwald quote that I'm going to read that I think kind of sums it up. I think you did a pretty good job of explaining it there. But the quote is, in the many worlds interpretation, the universe is constantly spinning off alternate histories of itself, and human consciousness is along for the ride as a passive agent. Each time any system changes its quantum state, a whole new universe is spawned that is totally unobservable to all its other copies, which represent other outcomes for the quantum state. There is no observer involved in this process, but each observer has an infinite number of copies of itself and states of its consciousness. So,
yeah, it's a complicated thing for sure. And I like to think of it more in the mathematical sense, where mathematically if you're looking at making a choice, mathematically, there are an infinite number of results that can come from whichever choice you choose, or you know what I mean?
Right.
And until you consciously make a choice, only when you make a choice does this mathematical cloud of possibilities collapse down into the choice that you chose.
Right.
Now, mathematically, I do believe that those other choices do go off and kind of create their own universe and the possibilities, and in sort of a theoretical mathematical sense that does exist. But what we need to, I mean, what John Titor and this whole thing is based off of is, no, there is an actual physical universe that breaks off,
that we can enter and travel to and influence.
That we are able to traverse to and use for time travel and things like that.
Right.
And I'm not sure why that is the case with the time travel thing, but John Titor says so. So we're just going to go with it for now.
Right. And really, when it comes down to the John Titor story, this idea of world lines and different realities and different timelines and different universes existing and these parallel dimensions living side by side, that is the crux to all of the John Titor apologists. When some of his predictions don't come true, the default answer is, well, it's because his timeline is different from ours.
Right.
And, because he entered our timeline or world line, it changed our world line and our trajectory so that, so it kind of becomes non-falsifiable thing, where
right.
you can't really prove it and you can't really falsify it, because how in the heck are you supposed to prove or falsify it? The fact that something didn't happen.
Right. Well, there's just an answer for everything.
Right.
Is the thing. And he makes some wild claims.
Yeah.
I mean, he's talking about how there was an American Civil War in 2005,
right.
and he's warning against this American Civil War in 2005. He talks about World War III breaking out in 2015, which I thought was an interesting date to give it, given the whole 2016 being the extension of 2012, when we get into, some sort of Antichrist prophecy thing.
Right.
But I mean, he's making some pretty serious claims here.
Yeah.
So this, it just gets so messy when you start thinking of him as a hoax. You're like, well, bro, okay, that is you are really going for it. So,
Take no prisoners.
Right. And the whole psychology to the whole thing is so, the whole psychology to the whole John Titor story makes it that much more complicated, because there are times when he's speaking and you're like, I'm totally don't even understand his mode of thought. You're like, okay, that he kind of does seem like a time trap. Are you a real dude? But then there's other times when it's just so contrived. He's talking about how us in this time period are not known for our
compassion and our empathy
and how can you eat cheeseburgers when they're poisoned? I say it in that mocking tone, but really, cheeseburger, that there's a lot of poison in our food, obviously. But he kind of goes off on these rants that you would expect from somebody doing a hoax of a time traveler to come back and complain about.
Right. Yeah, and before we move too far along, I did want to bring up, based on the whole concept of the Elliott Wheeler model and this theory, Oliver Williams, who is the guy who's sort of been the spokesperson for John Titor, as far as he basically, what he did was he collected all the different forum posts that John Titor made over the few short months that he was here, and he created a website. It's real basic, johntitor.com. You guys can go check it out. So he's the guy who runs the site, and he's the guy that has been on Coast to Coast several times and talked about John Titor and talked about where we're at and how he believes he's obviously, sort of a believer, if you will, of the story. So one thing he does mention in an interview with George Norrie that really stuck out to me, of course, just because being, a Christian, coming from that Christian perspective, and even just a theistic perspective, he uses the Elliott Wheeler model effectively to deny a biblical God, at least a Christian God.